Today I want to start by talking about the whole topic of teacher PTSD. When most people think of PTSD, they think of war veterans, or they think of survivors of one sole traumatic incident. But there are other forms of PTSD that can develop as a result of long-term stress and being in a constant state of fight, flight, or freeze. I want to read you some of the symptoms of PTSD. And if you're a teacher, think about how you have felt, your coworkers, and see if any of this sounds familiar. There is disassociation and out-of-body experiences, lack of feeling, being emotionally numb, negative self-image and self-esteem, insomnia, nightmares and trouble sleeping, feelings of anger and rage, feelings of depression and anxiety, feelings of guilt or shame, racing thoughts, spiraling, being on alert, looking out for danger, hypervigilance, recurring flashbacks or memories of a difficult season, and even losing the will to live. I know that as a teacher, I had experienced every single thing on the list that I just read except the last one. And the truth is, for many teachers, the profession has turned into a stressful, joy-sucking disaster. As humans, we can endure really difficult situations if they have a sense of meaning and if there is a sense of joy. But with a modern state of education, some people are losing the joy and losing the benefit of seeing meaning in what they're doing. I really like the 80-20 rule, and I've heard it applied in all kinds of different ways. But one of them that I've heard a lot with work is that if you're lucky, if you're one of the most lucky people on the planet, 80% of your job will be good and enjoyable, but 20% of your job is really gonna stink. However, at least how it was starting to feel for me, it was exactly reverse. 80% of my job was starting to feel miserable, and I could only look at 20% of the experiences that I was having in the classroom or as a teacher as really positive ones, but all of the negative emotions and feelings and problems that I just mentioned was totally overshadowing the joy, the genuine joy that I did have sometimes as a teacher. And the truth is, the reason I talk about how it is so important that students behave and are kind and respectful to teachers is for many teachers, that's where everything rises and falls. I know that I had some good years where I felt like so many things were completely ridiculous when it came to maybe requirements, paperwork, meetings, even sometimes administrators. But if I felt like I was really connecting with students and they were learning and they were excited, that would re-energize me. That's what gave me hope and joy and meaning and purpose, because I could tangibly look at what was happening with my students and think it's worth me getting up in the morning. And I might start to get a little emotional. But those years where the kids treated me like garbage, their parents treated me like garbage, my administration was treating me like garbage, I'd turn on a news talk show and all they did was bash teachers, I was like, no way, why would anyone stay in this? And I know that a lot of teachers feel this way. There is literally no worse feeling than pouring out your heart day in and day out, giving your all, getting physically and mentally ill over the stress of a job only to have people stare at you and roll their eyes and tell you that you're stupid or what you're saying doesn't matter to them, or totally disregard everything that you're saying and then get chewed out by those kids' parents. For a lot of teachers, that kind of thing is the last straw. I know that we've all heard the oxygen mask analogy, that basically if you're in an airplane and it's going down, you got to put your own oxygen mask on first so then you can help your kids or whoever is around you. But the truth is, as a society, teachers are losing oxygen. And it is very difficult when you feel like you can barely breathe to be a teacher. Being a good teacher requires absolutely everything of you. It's physically draining, mentally draining, emotionally draining. But again, if it's rewarding, if you can see fruit from your labors, that's rejuvenating. And so that's why I just think this whole topic of teacher mental health is so important. So let's talk about some of the things that really contributes to anxiety, depression, and even PTSD in teachers. There's the really huge ones like everything that's happened from 2020 until now. Most people would be somewhat understanding of that. There's the horrible isolated events like what happened in Texas recently. That's just unthinkable. But the thing that surprises most people is just being in a classroom can be insanely stressful. There are kids oftentimes that melt down, yell, scream, throw desks. Sometimes whole classrooms have to be evacuated because one student is melting down. Certain schools have a high amount of students getting into physical fights and altercations, and sometimes teachers end up getting in the middle of that. Sometimes teachers are actually threatened. In one of my old school districts, a kindergartner went home and essentially lied on the teacher, and then the parent came up to the school and attacked the teacher, and it ended up putting her in the hospital. And so as teachers, we know that there are unstable parents out there, and so we're constantly afraid, is a kid gonna lie to their parent and twist something around on purpose just to get us in trouble? And those are all kind of big things still, but even smaller so to speak, day-to-day things can really pile on the stress. I know that especially when I taught middle school or even departmentalized elementary school, sometimes I would have classes that for whatever reason, the group dynamics of the kids just yielded horrible behavior. And then I could have another class that was nearly perfectly behaved. So sometimes just the grouping of kids, you just know beforehand that they're going to be arguing with each other, talking back, shouting out, trying to be funny, singing and dancing, that kind of thing. But it gets really tiresome and stressful and old. I know for me, the constant observation culture at many of my schools sent my anxiety through the roof, to the point where if I would even hear a doorknob jiggle, it was like adrenaline and stress would just shoot through my entire body. Because if you're not a teacher, basically administrators, coaches, counselors, even parents, random folks that you have no clue who they are, bust into your room, get cozy in a chair, and just sit there and watch you with a pen and paper. I think that that would be stressful for most individuals on the job, but then imagine you've got a classroom of maybe 30 students and kids kind of know what's going on. Some kids use that as an opportunity to act up because they think it's funny. And all of that just gets really stressful, especially because if you've had experiences like mine, a person could come into your room for 5 minutes, see something that they don't really like, and then say that you cannot, teach from a certain book or use a certain instructional strategy or whatever for the rest of the school year. Just one quick example is I have always loved classroom novels. And when I was kind of left alone, sometimes I could get through like 10 full-length classroom novels with like 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, and the kids loved it. But there's been years where there might be a new coach or somebody in the building that doesn't like the concept of kids reading whole class novels, and so they would just say, after you finish this book, I don't want to see you reading from novels anymore. I'd rather see you using this curriculum or that curriculum, or doing, test prep packets or whatever it is that year, whatever is in style. So you just know as a teacher that so much is riding on these observations. You can get in tons of trouble for ridiculous things. That kids could act up any second. I would even be afraid to sit down for a second because I don't know, when I was growing up, teachers sat down at their desk all the time. But for whatever reason in this day and age, a teacher that's sitting down is akin to the worst teacher on the planet. So sometimes my knees and my feet and ankles would be hurting and I would just want to sit down for a second, but I'm like, no, I can't sit down because if an administrator walks in and I'm sitting down, they're going to judge me harshly. And it's just those kind of crazy things that don't really exist in other professions as much. I've already touched on it before, but parent interactions can be so miserable and so stressful. I've had years where I feel like the parent had nothing to do but to try to pick fights with me and find things wrong, to complain to me. If I was lucky, normally it was complaining to principals and board members and the district over just ridiculous things. And it wasn't like these parents wanted a solution. I think they really enjoyed the perceived power struggle. Maybe they had a teacher back in the day that hurt them and they've had a vendetta to get rid of teachers ever since then. I really don't get some of the strange experiences that I've had, but it's just so stressful. There can also be really, really long work days. I know that for a lot of people, there's a perception that, teachers have really short work days and just tons of free time. But there was definitely years where I would come as early as I could, where basically only the custodial staff was in the building. Sometimes I'd have schools that would unlock at 5 in the morning. I'd get there at 5 in the morning. And sometimes I would be staying till 5 p.m. or beyond. So it's not uncommon for teachers to come early, stay late, work on the weekends, work over holiday breaks, and all of that tends to add up too. There's also just in general a huge lack of control. I read an article recently that talked about how certain jobs have really, really high demands, but the professionals have really, really low control over what's going on. And those tend to be some of the hardest, most stressful, and sometimes even unhappy jobs for people. And that is 100% the case with teaching. Obviously, we don't have control over which students are in our classroom. There's definitely been years where we'd have a student transfer in and I had built really awesome classroom culture and we had our routines and procedures going, and one kid could come in and turn things upside down. And non-teachers don't get this, but I'm sure every teacher has had that happen to them before. And it's not necessarily you can just say hey, can we please move this kid somewhere else? Although I've tried before. Unfortunately, students can totally lie and make up rumors and destroy a teacher's reputation. And there's nothing we could do about it because a lot of times we don't even end up finding out about it until the damage has been done. I had basically all of these things and more happen to me the year that I taught in private school. If you want to hear about that nightmare of a story, check out my Why I Quit Teaching Private School video. It was horrible. And I genuinely think working at that school did give me some form of PTSD. As an unrelated side note, whenever I would even see the logo of this private school on random people's cars, I would have a full body kind of shock reaction. I would refuse to go into that town for anything whatsoever. I would definitely have nightmares, and still to this day will have random nightmares about my experience at that school. And to make matters worse, these super super naughty children tracked me down when I switched and worked at another school district and would call and leave crazy voicemails on my work phone. And I know that all of this sounds like something out of a movie, but it's just things that teachers go through that most of them won't talk about because they don't want everybody judging them as weak or ineffective. And in addition to all of the mental health concerns, I also want to take just a minute to talk about some of the health issues. I know personally for me as a teacher, I would have constant heart pains and chest pains and heart palpitations and flutters. There was a couple of times where I literally woke up in the middle of the night and thought that I was having a heart attack because I was just having this super, super intense pain that I felt like I couldn't even take full breaths. It was really scary. I once had to go to the doctor and get an ultrasound because there was like something weird happening in my abdominal region. I have no idea what, but it felt like there was like something in there. It was like really scary. I mean, I just would have like so many random health issues whenever I was, during the active part of the school year, and they would calm down during the summertime. And even though this is my own personal responsibility, I found it really hard to live a healthy life as a teacher. I would always have tons of caffeine and tons of sugar to make up for my lost sleep because I literally couldn't sleep through the night a lot of times as a teacher. And since I felt like I was working all of the time, I just did not feel like I had the time or energy to make super, super healthy meals. So it was just all I could do to like go to fast food places and get dinner and then just crash and sleep for hours after I would get home. So all of this to say that teacher mental health and physical health are a really big deal. And as a result of all of the factors that I've talked about in other videos, it's really feeling like teaching is an unsustainable career for so many educators out there. And it's not just teachers, it's principals too. I've heard this from principals, and in the same ways that teachers feel a ton of like pressure and micromanagement and like unfair stipulations are being put on them, a lot of principals feel the same way from central office. And then central office would say that, from the superintendent up to like state legislators, that they're putting pressure and micromanaging them. So it's just this weird unending cycle. And of course, students feel like teachers are putting all of this pressure on them and micromanaging them. So it's just, I gotta be honest, it's not a happy system. It's not a happy place, really, I don't think, for many people these days. I think to the degree that teachers have freedom, there can be a sense of purpose and joy and meaning. And to the extent that by some kind of circumstances, students seem open, receptive, appreciative, are willing to like cooperate with teachers, then teaching can be joyful again. But when those factors are missing and all of these things are combined, it just is completely unsustainable. At the end of the day, I clearly don't have all the answers. That's why I just flat out ended up needing to leave teaching. I found that anytime there was teaching stress combined with any other life stress, like I could barely function. It was all I could do to just like get through the school day. And that's what happened basically the year that I ended up quitting and leaving like a couple of months early. I was having a ton of just family intense problems, family members going into the hospital, family members threatening to end their life, family conflict. And these people were in like another state. So just the increased feelings of a lack of control with my own family situations going on, plus like the stress of teaching and all of those things just like ended up being way too much for my own health. There's the odd sensation of feeling like you're just putting a band-aid on a wound that is going to get reopened the next day. So it's like, yes, you can do self-care. Yes, you can take bubble bath. Yes, you can have like a weekend with friends at the movie. I don't know what normal people do for fun, but you just know that all of that is going to feel like it's being undone when you step back into the building on Monday. And that is truly the depressing thing about teaching. I just remember like on the one hand being so happy during holidays, but having like a foreboding sense of doom, knowing that it's all about to come to an end and I'm going to have to go back into like action mode as soon as I step back into the school building. But on the same token, just like with my kind of little wound analogy, if you don't take care of the wounds, then it can get infected and really, really be bad. So it's the same thing with like your mental health, your physical health. It can be tempting to say like, why am I going to do self-care? Why am I going to go to counseling if I just know this situation is going to continue? But for somebody that has to stay in teaching or in their building or whatever the case, sometimes being able to go to counseling or do, different kinds of self-care things really can at least help you to be able to get up and keep going to work. So anyway, I feel like I've been weirdly teary. I'm like totally not a public crier, but I hope this was helpful for somebody. Even if it was just one person that needed to hear anything in this video, it was totally worth it to me. And just, I beg you, teacher out there, don't let anybody shame you. Don't let anybody tell you that you're being weak or that you're being a snowflake or a crybaby or tell you that you're just spoiled. I have heard and read some of the worst things in some comment sections about teachers, and it's just so heartbreaking. But I just have to remember and remind myself that most people have no idea what teachers go through. So prioritize your health and don't feel like if you need to leave or quit or step back from the classroom, don't feel like you're a failure. All right, so let me know what you guys think in the comment section. And if you haven't subscribed, I would love it if you do. Talk to you guys later.